Consistent with the mental chemistry view, Wundt attempts to develop and operationalize an elaborate set of categories to describe the basic elements of perception and apperception. His two categories for mental elements are sensations and feelings. Sensations are the result of the stimulation of sense organs. Each sensation is going to have an intensity, for instance, bright versus dim, and a modality, touch or taste, and so on. Modalities have associated qualities. So, for instance, taste is going to have a set of qualities like sweet and sour. Feelings are distinct from sensations, but they co-occur. He proposes a tri-dimensional account of feelings, in which feelings have values along three orthogonal dimensions: pleasantness and unpleasantness, excitement and calm, and strain and relaxation. Now, this leads to an elaborate set of categorizations that Wundt then has to use operations to tie to phenomenon and then try to devise sets of experiments to determine how they arise, how they combine, how they fade away, and so on. And this is a daunting task given the Baroque population of categorizations that he needs to operationalize. Wundt adopts two primary experimental techniques for studying simple conscious phenomena: the use of introspection and the use of reaction time. Unlike many psychologists who follow him in this tradition, Wundt's use of introspection is highly constrained and in keeping with its use in physiology and psychophysiology. Subjects often provide only a yes or no answer to signify whether or not they're experiencing a sensation. Wundt does train subjects in introspection. However, he's just trying to teach the appropriate categories, since these categories aren't native, natural, ordinary language categories. For Wundt, introspection provides immediate observation of mental phenomena, direct observation unmediated by measurement and recording devices. Reaction time initially enters into Wundt's experimental repertoire due to Helmholtz and due to his exposure to the Dutch physiologist Cornelius Dunder's work. However, Wundt has little success utilizing reaction time, and he eventually abandons reaction time as a means of operationalization, deeming it too unreliable. This dooms him essentially to an exclusive reliance on introspection. While he is clever at experimental design and the development of instrumentation, he is burdened by the limitations of his ability to operationalize an enormous volume of categories in order to test his dynamical theories about their relationships and interactions. In the United States, the most prominent introspectionist psychologist is the structuralist Edward Titchener. Titchener's an English student of Wundt who goes to Cornell, where he ostensibly continues Wundt's general project of trying to identify the elemental parts of simple human consciousness and their interactions. While within the United States, Wundt and Titchener are closely associated, they have significant and important differences in both their methodology and in their particular approach to the topic. For instance, this is Titchener's set of categorizations. He breaks down conscious experiences into three different major categories: perceptions, ideas, and emotions, each of which is then broken down into a series of other categorizations. Now, Titchener doesn't limit himself to simple conscious phenomenon, but he expands his reach to include higher-order phenomenon, as well as seeking neural correlates for conscious experience. He characterizes his explanatory and predictive goals more in the spirit of an anatomy of conscious experience rather than a physiology, in that he focuses on elements and their composite structure rather than on the functions that they perform. The quote from our chapter nicely illustrates this point. The primary aim of the experimental psychologist has been to analyze the structure of the mind and to ravel out the elemental processes from the tangle of consciousness, or if we may change the metaphor, to isolate the constituents in the given conscious formation. His task is a vivisection, but a vivisection which shall yield structural, not functional results. He tries to discover, first of all, what is there and in what quantity, not what it is there for. As a result of both his increase in scope and his alteration of focus, Titchener expands and alters his reliance on the one operationalization that's available to the introspectionist psychologist, the use of introspection. Titchener's use of introspection differs from Wundt's in that it requires subjects to actively probe or analyze their experiences to formulate their reports, and this requires extensive training. Now, Titchener, like Wundt, intends this extensive training to cultivate a facility with the underlying conceptual structures. However, he also wants to cultivate an ability to observe and describe conscious experiences without what he calls the tincture of stimulus error. Stimulus error occurs when a subject reports their perceptions, the meaning of the stimulus, or its conceptualization. For instance, if you're shown a picture of Calvin here, you're supposed to report the hues and the shapes of your experience and not report seeing a dog or seeing Calvin. This combination of indoctrination into descriptive categories and active, even retroactive analysis by the subjects renders introspection even more methodologically problematic as an experimental tool. In addition to the difficulties surrounding Titchener's use of introspection, he is also relatively uninterested and dismissive of research areas where significant progress is occurring. He's not particularly interested in animal behavior, in evolution, in abnormal behavior, in learning, in development, or in intersubjective variation. In the next lecture module, we'll turn our attention to Brentano and then conclude our discussion of introspection in psychology by contemplating the strengths and weaknesses that their work reveals regarding the use of introspection in psychology.